Good morning and welcome to Business Minds. I'm Cindy Bird.
And I'm Melissa Smith.
We are so glad you're choosing to join us this morning on this dreary, rainy morning where we keep talking about spring the last 2 weeks.
Right.
And last week, of course, we're excited for the official arrival of spring, but it's certainly not feeling like spring out there yet.
not
We're,
yet.
we're still hanging in there,
Yeah.
trying to bring the springier wardrobe in and think positively.
Get there.
But we're going to bring you some good warmth and positive thoughts today through Business Minds. We're really excited to have a guest with us today, Brian Anderson, who is founder and owner of Notionovus. We're going to learn more about his business and what he
Very
does
interesting stuff.
and what brings him to Business Minds today. Learn about what's on his business mind and how Melissa and I can help him work through that. So Brian, welcome.
Good to be here.
Thank
you very much, Cindy
you.
and Melissa.
We're really happy that you decided to join us and I'm excited to reconnect with you. You and I had done some work together in the past, but good to have you back and talking with you again and getting an update on what's been happening with you and your business. But if you could share with our viewers, why did you start Notionovus? What's your vision and purpose for the business?
Well, I retired from Caterpillar about 5 years ago, and when I retired from Caterpillar, I really wanted to take my IT and my software background forward into kind of a career renaissance. I was working on the factory floor at Caterpillar with their lean initiative, with their Caterpillar production system, and I thought a lot of the concepts involved with lean could be applied in the IT or the information technology space.
Sure.
Okay, very good. Well, and Notionovus, that's an interesting business name. Could
Yeah,
you help our viewers
Notion-
understand that?
Notionovus is the combination of two Latin words. The Latin word notio for thought and the Latin word novus for new. So the
Very interesting.
gist is that we're about new thoughts and new ideas.
Awesome. New thoughts and new ideas. Well, you had contacted Melissa and I, reached out to us because of your interest in locating that ideal first customer. And then once you do, how do you approach that ideal first customer? So we've put together some coaching points that we want to share with you this morning. And there are 3 coaching points. And then you're going to have a follow-up coaching session as well after the show. So we'll leave you with what we call your homework assignment
Yep.
to work on so that you're prepared for that follow-up coaching session as well.
Yep.
So Melissa's going to kick it off with coaching point number 1.
Coaching point number 1. So, Brian, I read all about Notionovus. Is it Notionovus? It's a little quicker.
It's Notionovus.
Notionovus. Okay. And it was a fascinating concept. So you do middleware consulting. Do you want to explain to our viewers, just in a really quick synopsis, what
Sure.
middleware consulting is?
Sure. Well, companies and people all over the world use software. And people are familiar with Microsoft Office, and some people are familiar with, say, QuickBooks accounting systems. And middleware is basically the software that developers write to connect different applications together. So if I had a spreadsheet that I use to control, say, production on my shop floor, and I wanted those numbers to automatically move over into my accounting system when we actually built a part and the machine clicked off and said, yes, this part is complete, or there are quality checks and we have to scrap parts. When you have data being generated on a shop floor and you want to get that data automatically moved over into, say, your accounting system.
Okay.
That's an example of middleware. Another example might be if you have a business relationship with, and you're running, say, Microsoft Dynamics accounting system, and your vendor or the person who makes piece parts for you is using, say, QuickBooks, and you want their software application to send you invoices automatically when they ship you product.
Okay.
So those are the types of things that middleware does. It basically bridges the gap between two totally different software applications.
Okay. Very good. So, thank you for giving us some examples. We're going to put you on the spot though, because in reading your weblog and some of your information, you have such a strength for writing things in a way that I could understand. And so I thought we'd give you a little pop quiz so that we could make this digestible by the viewers and hopefully give them some insight and maybe have them be able to think of someone like, oh, I know someone who could use this. So we're gonna give you a little pop quiz. What is a problem that you could solve for, say, a local business owner that owns multiple restaurants in the area that are not chain restaurants or franchise? So for example, everybody in Peoria knows about Salt, Sugar, what are their other
Time.
chains? Time. So they have a whole chain. So what, say, could you solve for perhaps that business owner?
So every restaurant basically has compliance issues with the government, local and state, and of course national. They have to obey certain rules, and that means reporting.
Okay.
The people at McDonald's or at a national chain like Dunkin' Donuts have systems in their back offices that
Sure.
handle all of this paperwork for them. Local restaurants rely usually, or a small restaurant or an independent restaurant will rely usually on spreadsheets and their own Microsoft Office tools that they have to get that information. And again, it's really, people put a lot of manual effort into compliance
Okay.
that could be streamlined if you could just connect their Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that they use to track certain information up with whatever the destination for that data is. It saved them having to send faxes and get on the phone with people when there are concerns, etc., so that the whole thing can be run on in an automatic.
In a restaurant, interesting. Fascinating. I didn't even think of that. I was thinking you were going to say something about vendor relationships or something
Well, there's
like
that too.
But compliance is super. I mean, that's key.
Very key.
You have to have. You have to be in compliance to stay in business. So that's huge. So I love that you hit on the compliance issue, because without being compliant, you can't work with vendors, right? You can't stay in business. So that's huge. How about a local nonprofit in the area? Can you think of a local nonprofit? Peoria has a plethora of them. I can think of Habitat for Humanity, St. Jude, Susan G. Komen. Just that's three right off the top. I'm sure you have one that's close to your heart. How could you help a local nonprofit in the area?
So any local nonprofit or any nonprofit that does casework has to report this casework, and they have reporting responsibility with the state of Illinois. And the state of Illinois actually does have electronic requirements for, if you help someone with mental health issues or you help someone with medical issues, you need to, if the state is paying for those, you need to make sure that you document in a form and send that information to the state, and they require that to be electronic. And so right now there are many different, we call these vertical market applications that some of these nonprofits use, but a lot of it has to do with getting things in the right format and just checking the quality of those reports that get sent to the
reporting. So the caseworker, you're saying, could still do their reporting that they do, still do their site visits and things like that. And then they come to you and they say, okay, Brian, this is our form that we use. Now, in order to submit it to the state of Illinois, we have to put it into a totally different system. And it's very manual. It's very labor intensive, right? Say it doubles their time.
Sure.
The problem you solve is saying, okay, let's see what you're working with. Let's see what you have to get it to. I'm going to help you convert what you do to what it needs to be to meet the state of Illinois. So you're not suggesting that they change the way they do their case visits. Rather, you're suggesting, let's take how you then take this final information from your case visit and turn it into an electronic submission to the state of Illinois.
Right. I think I read something very interesting in on the web, so I know it's for real.
It's got to be true, right?
But a doctor was quoted as saying he spends 2/3 of his time not serving patients, but serving the government.
Yes.
And that is something that I'd like to see change.
Okay.
And with automation in the field of compliance and reporting, you can actually change that and spend more time, whether you're a caseworker or a physician or even a restaurant owner. You can spend more time interacting with your customers than in the back office filling out paperwork.
Very good. Okay.
Absolutely.
That
And
is
obviously,
really-
Peoria has a huge healthcare component,
Absolutely, yeah.
so I can see that working
All
very
right,
well.
very good. So, tell us a little bit about what makes Notionovus unique. What sets you apart from other middleware consultants?
Okay. The middleware industry is a component of the overall software industry. And
Okay.
and it's about 50%. When you have a big software application that you're trying to roll out or develop, you'll spend about 50% of the time and money on connecting that with other applications that it needs to use. And so
Okay.
if we spend about $4 trillion as a world on software every year, you can assume that there's about $2 trillion worth of spend in just getting all these software applications to talk together, not developing
Wow.
new ones.
Okay.
Where I specifically want to concentrate Notionovus is reducing the amount of waste in that industry. There's a lot of software development that goes on that's essentially reinventing the wheel.
Okay.
We're intent on building something that's just for us, just customization, without changing slightly the way we do work so that it's less expensive and we can reuse other people's software development efforts. And so there's a tremendous amount of waste in that $2 trillion. And what I'd like to do is to streamline the middleware industry by promoting reuse and promoting an environment where it's clear what needs to be reused and what needs to be reused and what needs to be custom.
Very good. All right. So tell us a little bit about, for our viewers and for my own interest, because I find this fascinating.
It is.
What are the top 3 problems that you solve? If you were to say, this is what I do in a nutshell, what are those top 3 things that you would go to someone with and say, this is what I can solve for you?
Okay. So a lot of it is kind of the misunderstanding of how software development works in the world today. Okay. We have, and I kind of wrote this down to prepare, data has no value. That's an assumption. Okay. We assume data has no value because we're not willing to pay for data. We're not willing to pay to browse data on the internet. We're not willing to, big companies are not necessarily willing to pay their suppliers for data. They assume it's part and parcel of the cost of the materials that they buy. And so when you hide the value of data, which in my opinion, all data has value,
Absolutely.
Or there wouldn't be an industry that spends $2 trillion to move that data around. If all data does have value, then it's important that we solve the problem of determining the value of data.
Okay, so the valuation of
So
data.
the valuation of data.
Okay.
A lot of people are convinced that we don't need standards. We don't need to lean out this process. We don't need to save money. There's no cost of poor quality in this realm. But they're kind of ignoring the fact that there's a lot of, it's essentially the wild, wild west, okay?
Okay.
When you get on the internet, everything up to a certain level is standardized. Every computer uses TCP IP to connect to other computers, and there's all kinds of standards that govern your web browsers and how the web works, etc. But when it comes to 2 applications sharing data back and forth, there are no standards.
Okay.
And so every time you bring in a consultant to help you solve this data connection issue between two different applications, they like to start from scratch. And it's the starting from scratch that's really eating us alive. So nobody really thinks that this is a burning platform or that we really need to use this leaning out or standardization in this area, but it's very, very important.
Because of the wastefulness.
Because of the wastefulness, absolutely.
Okay.
And then there's a third conception that I fight quite a bit, and that is this is impossible. It's impossible to implement this. And what I guess I would say to that is we're solving these problems in silos. It's not that the data isn't being moved, it's just being moved in many, many different ways by many, many different packages of software. And because we're not using standards, people think that this is the impossible dream, but in actuality, because we are solving these problems only on a piecemeal basis, we could take a step back from the leaves and see the whole forest.
Okay.
Wow.
And fix this.
That's just fascinating.
Very good. All right. Well, that is
Absolutely fascinating.
super helpful.
Well, I think, when Melissa asked what sets you apart, what makes you different from other middleware consultants, I would take that a step further and say, are there competitors that you would consider of your business that stand out to you in the industry, and what are they doing to connect to customers and especially to connect with customers maybe on an emotional level to really have that message resonate?
Yeah, it's interesting you use that word emotional. I think that a lot of the activity that I saw when I worked at Caterpillar and that I've heard from other people and other constituents in my field is that the emotions associated with middleware are generally bad. People lay awake at night and thinking about how these problems of data connectivity just won't go away, and how much money they're shoveling into trying to fix a problem, any specific detailed problem. And so we have very large players in this industry. We have Oracle, we have Microsoft, we have Informatica, and there are several very large companies that essentially promise, hey, we'll connect your two applications up together, and then all you have to do is sit back and monitor the system and make sure it works every day. In actuality, because of all the customization that goes on, it never seems to work out that way. And as a very, very small player in this industry, it hurts to hear about all of these failed projects. Like, I was watching as healthcare.gov went online, and
okay.
I think there's a very famous example of software development effort gone wrong, and and what had to be done to fix that was they had to bring in a group, a team, a specialized team from Silicon Valley to essentially rework the way that system was being thought out. And so we have very good examples in our industry of where things go very, very wrong, but when things go really right and everybody's happy with it, it's
not
crickets.
the middlewares, right? Not the middleware person
you don't
celebrate.
You don't hear anything about it. So it's like any other good news day. There's nothing to report.
We're going to touch on that point as our third coaching point. I'm really glad you brought that up.
We are going to touch on that when we get to it. Well, one of the things that you obviously came to us saying, how do I find that ideal customer? And so I want to talk about in coaching point 2, potential customers. What do they want to know? What sort of messages inspire them to act? But backing up from that, when you think about the top 3 solutions you offer, the top 3 problems you help solve, help us understand who is your ideal client.
So I come from Caterpillar, and I picked this particular industry because I saw the pain. When you see pain, that means there's a business opportunity.
Sure.
So I saw a very big business opportunity when I left Caterpillar, and the ideal customer is really someone who the Caterpillars, the Walmarts of the world, have very strict requirements on how you do business with them. If you can't match their requirements electronically, they won't do business with you, and you can't supply them. So it's one thing to build something that Walmart wants to sell for you. It's another thing to get your product into their supply chain.
Okay.
And so I think the ideal customer has these compliance requirements.
Okay.
They have to provide data in a certain format, and they don't operate in that way. They don't have already some software that modifies or pulls data out of their spreadsheet and stuffs it in an electronic envelope and sends it over to Walmart or Caterpillar or any other company or the U.S. government.
So to conceptualize this down to possibly perhaps a different market, if you boiled it down, it would be any employer with a compliance requirement.
Any small to medium-sized company with a compliance requirement would be an ideal candidate for
So a tax
my
reporting
business.
requirement, a
Tax
health
yep.
department requirement, a workers' comp reporting requirement, any type
Yeah.
of, okay.
HR
Anytime
regulations.
you want to take
yeah.
information out of the spreadsheet that you're storing it in,
Which is
and
every
get it-
business.
yeah,
Yeah.
and get it into a reporting requirement or a
Okay.
compliance
So
requirement.
then we could possibly take it down 2 to 3 notches from the Caterpillars and the Walmarts of the area to the small businesses, the SC2s, the powder coaters, even a housekeeping business that has a tax reporting compliance requirement, something like that.
Well, and all the businesses that are suppliers to
Yes.
larger companies might fall into that small to medium
Sure,
size.
absolutely. And I guess what I'm looking for is more of a business that's interested or willing to take a little risk.
Sure.
Because what I'm
Okay.
proposing we do is very different from what you're going to hear, Oracle or Microsoft or IBM quote you.
So-
Okay, I'm proposing we do this more from a bottom-up, grassroots integration
Excellent.
versus this is our software package and this is how
Take it
you
or
have to
leave it.
use it. And,
Okay.
Yeah, take it
Well,
or leave it.
yeah, and that falls into that psychographic category. When you're building a profile of your ideal customer, there are a number of techniques you can use to build that profile, and finding that business that is willing to take a risk falls into getting inside their head and saying, where's that business that thinks along those lines or that's willing to do that, versus the demographics are easy. You're going to go to the Department of Commerce, you're going to go to the Small Business Administration, you're going to look up data about sizes of companies, how many employees they have, how long they've been in business, what's their valuation. The demographic side is easier. The psychographic tends to be more challenging with business customers because businesses don't buy on want. Like consumers tend to buy on want. Businesses buy on need. As you said yourself, they're buying to make some point of pain go away.
So before I started work at Caterpillar and after I got out of college, I started working for a small supplier to Caterpillar here in the Peoria area. And we kept getting these letters from Caterpillar's purchasing department saying, thou shalt put barcodes on your material.
okay.
And that was one of the first projects I worked on was and that's why you'll see a little barcode stuff on my website. But any time you have a purchasing department, you have kind of the anchor draggers, the people
Okay.
who purchasing has to keep working with to get up to snuff, up to speed on the IT requirements that corporate IT is pushing, and so there's this battle between should we let go of this supplier because they can't comply to
Sure.
our IT requirements, or should we keep
Okay.
the supplier? And if the supplier is small but strategically critical,
Right.
then what do? Well, who wins out is the operations manager who says we've got to put out X number of widgets by tomorrow morning, and this small little supplier who doesn't have their IT act in order is going to be able to supply those widgets. I just need to get on the phone with them. And so the IT department is left frustrated, And the purchasing department is left frustrated, but who wins that argument is the operations manager
Okay.
who says, we got to make production.
So you have to make the connection then. In your ideal customer, you have to be able to make that intimate connection and build that relationship with the decision maker and craft your message for that audience. And that is going to be the question you should ask yourself when crafting that message and trying to make that connection, because that relational aspect is so important. Who is going to give me the most open and honest information? And then you craft your message for them and start out very upfront saying, this is risk. I loved that term that you used, right? I want to start from the bottom up. And to them, when they put a Band-Aid on something, these small suppliers to these bigger customers, they put a Band-Aid on something. They know it. They know it's causing them more heartache. So to be able to connect with the decision maker and craft it to connect with them and say, I want openness and honest communication because I want to solve this problem from the root of the problem, not a Band-Aid. That, I think, is going to be key in your messaging to find your ideal customer, and how to get them to give your buy-in is really explain to them from the heart of, I can tell that you're talking from your heart. You're talking from your experience. And it's going to be, I'm not here to put another Band-Aid on. Am I saying that it's not going to be a little risky? Nope, I can't guarantee you it's not going to be a little bit risky. But is it any more of a risk than putting a Band-Aid over a Band-Aid over a Band-Aid? Right?
Absolutely.
It's almost like even before you are ready to make a pitch to that customer, I could see you doing some informational interviews, even going out, once you've built that profile and now you know who fits that profile, setting up some informational interviews and talking to them about where their pain points are and how are things going. And you're gauging their level of risk, you're gauging their level of openness, and you're starting to build that relationship. It's like you're approaching them with no expectations. I'm not here to sell my business, myself to you as the solution yet. That's what you're saying to yourself in your own mind. I'm here to learn as much as I can about what you're experiencing. And then once you have established yourself as a subject matter expert and someone who has that very unique approach, and your passion naturally comes through.
Right.
I know it because I've known you before, but Melissa has picked up on it in a very short amount of time. Your passion for what you do is there. And when people can interact with you in person and experience that, it's going to make a big difference in building those initial relationships. And then it's going to also help you go off and craft the message that's going to work the best.
Sure.
So,
and I think you touched on this briefly, but it's really important to understand, and we will continue this afterwards, and we also have a follow-up session, to understand that, to know your battle that you're fighting. So you might not be fighting the battle of giving them a solution, but rather fighting the battle of a different approach, right?
Absolutely.
So when you're crafting your message, knowing which battle you're fighting if they are not very apt to change, crafting your message in a way that says, well, change once big might be worth it than change over change over change over change. So understanding which battle you're facing, they might be convinced on your solution. It's just getting them to be willing to change might be your actual battle. So that's going to be key.
So just very quickly, we want to say that we're going to be taking a spring break next week. I'll be back the second week of April.
I will not be returning to Business Minds. My family and I are making a move to Southern Illinois, and I just want to thank you all for the experience that we've had here. And we are out of time. That time went by very fast. So,
thank you. Yeah, it's
thank
just so
everybody.
he's
I
so
wanna thank
fascinating
everybody
to
go-
hear from, Brian. Yeah, you have so many great things to share.
Yes, we have. We did not even get through all of our information, but you have a coaching packet to take with you to help you find that ideal first client. And